Welcome to the first edition of the SAS Online Radio. The Shetland Astronomical Society is the most northerly astronomical society in the UK and is based in the Shetland Islands, to the north-east of Scotland. Shetland is only about 400 miles away from the Arctic Circle, and the 60-degree north line of latitude passes through the southern part of the Shetland mainland. The southern tip of our mainland is about 100 miles from the nearest point on mainland Scotland. In our online radio, we hope to interview local amateur astronomers, as well as professional astronomers and scientists who visit the islands. For our first edition, we interviewed astrophotographer Chris Brown. We also spoke to Brian Sheen, Fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society and Director of the Roseland Observatory in faraway Cornwall. But first to Chris Brown. Chris is Shetland's own astrophotographer and local Shetland Times astronomy columnist. Chris chatted recently with Anna and Mike about how to get started as an amateur astronomer and gave some tips on how to take your first astrophotos. He also had a few ideas for Christmas presents for the budding amateur astronomer.
The SAS Interview.
Hi Chris, welcome to the online radio. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, I'm Chris Brown. I'm, I suppose, an amateur astronomer for my sins. I enjoy going out in dark skies and taking photographs, and I have a sort of a healthcare science background that keeps me going during the day.
So what is it what you let go out in that cold, dark nights, just with your camera, froze your fingers off, froze the toes off? What is it what's interesting for you to do things like that? Normal people would be in bed.
Well, yes, sensible people would be in bed, but if you go out on those nights when it's quiet, there's few cars about, and you can just look up on a dark night, there's no moon about, and you can just see the Milky Way rising from one side of the sky, going right across above your head and setting on the other side. You can see the constellations, and you can just stand there and just look at all those stars. You can even see a galaxy. You can actually see something which is 2.5 million light years away.
Yeah, but galaxies, do you then not need a very big equipment to see galaxies?
You can see a galaxy with your eyeballs. You're standing inside of one, so when you see the Milky Way, you're looking at a galaxy. And then if you look in a certain place, you can see the Andromeda galaxy with your naked eye. Very easy to see. And you can just look around at constellations, the clusters of stars, the different colours of stars. If you get a really good night, you'll get the meteors going past. On some nights you'll get aurora to have a look at. You get near summer and you'll get actually satellites going past. You get the International Space Station, and that's just standing there before you do anything, as you get your eyes adjusted to be able to see all these things.
So as a beginner, I would not really spend a lot of money to do that hobby.
To do, as it were, observational astronomy, i.e. to get out and look at the stars, all you need to do is be warm and walk outside, stand there and let your eyes adjust to the darkness. Just get comfortable wherever you're sitting. I say to some people, why don't you get a sun lounger? There's nothing wrong with lying in a sun lounger wrapped up, just looking at the stars.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you need if that's as far as you want to go. And if you want to do a bit more, you can actually think to yourself, well, okay, I'd like to look at that constellation a bit more. Or I'd like to look at that cluster of stars a bit more, or that part of the Milky Way. Well, you can start using binoculars, just the ones you'd use during the day, the bird watching binoculars.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get really into it a bit further, you'll then say, okay, I want to see a bit more, so I'll get a tripod for my binoculars so I'm not having to shake when I'm holding them. And then you start thinking to yourself, do you want to spend more time out in the dark? Do you want to start looking at specific objects in the sky? Do you want to start looking with a telescope, or do you want to start taking photographs? Do you want to start counting meteors? And things like that. But that's when you're really getting to a point where basically those people who go to bed on a clear night are the crazy people. You know you're sensible being outside on a clear night enjoying yourself.
Right. Many people what have never looked before in a telescope, when they look the first time, they're a bit disappointed because they don't see that nice collar-shaped pictures what you get from Hubble Space Telescope. Why is that?
One, the obvious thing is the telescope you're looking through isn't the Hubble Space Telescope, and telescopes are all about gathering light. The bigger they are, the more light they gather in. The more light they gather in, the better the image. The other thing about the Hubble Space Telescope is its image is not taken in, as it were, the 15th or 25th of a second in which our eyes actually take in the image. They're taken over hours, so it collects all that light and puts it together over and over and over and gets all that faint, fine detail. And then you've got the problem with the eyes are very good at seeing at night time in black and white. But the colour bits of the eyes, which came later in evolution, they like brighter light to be able to see the colours. So when you look at something through a telescope or you're looking at the stars, you don't see the colours that much unless they're really bright. So through the telescope you see a very beautiful image when you just don't have the expectation that it's going to be a Hubble Space Telescope image. It's actually the real image. You are looking at the object, not at a photograph. You're looking at the object, and the light from that object is coming in through the telescope and into your eye. And as you would take a bit of time, there's no rush with astronomy, take a bit of time and start looking at things, you'll start seeing more and more details. You won't see colours, but you'll see more and more details.
So the telescope is a real connection to the cosmos.
Yes, you know, anything that gets the light from the cosmos into your eyes is a connection. And if you take a telescope, it will get more light into your eyes. It will give you more detailed views of the cosmos.
So if I'm a complete beginner with astronomy, how do I know what I'm looking at and what's interesting to look at?
How to know what you're looking at is probably the easiest way as a beginner is to get a star map or a planisphere. And your local bookshops will have packs which are sort of astronomy for beginners type packs, which have a star map, a book usually that explains the constellations and the planets, and will actually in that planisphere will actually show you how to use it to find things in the night. Beyond that, if you've got an internet connection, there are certain websites you can go onto which will start showing you different things that are easy to see in the night sky and some things that are less easy to see in the night sky, and you can start getting your knowledge together. It's not an instant thing, it's one of those things that you build up over time, and eventually you get to a point where you go outside and you point, oh yes, there's such and such a constellation, oh there's that star, oh there's that galaxy, and you'll get all that information over time.
So what about the planets? Can I see those as well? Or?
You can see certainly the main planets. It is usually useful these days probably to go onto the internet to find out where they are, or subscribe to one of the national or international astronomy magazines, or even get a program which tells you where the planets are. And you can see, start off from the sun, you can see Mercury. That's usually a planet that you'll see basically just after the sun has set or just before the sun rises, and you can see it with your naked eye. You can then see Venus coming back next. That's a very bright planet when it's up. It's up for about 260 odd days up in the west, it then disappears and then comes up for another 260 odd days in the east. You then can see the next planet very easily. You just look down because you're standing on it. And then you're going out
what
to the next...
would that be?
That would be Earth, wouldn't it?
Oh!
Terra firma. And then you move
Of course.
and then you move out to the outer planets. And the next one out is a planet smaller than ours, and that's Mars. And that, when you see it, it looks like a sort of a brick reddish type star. They're not stars. You find that they won't twinkle as much as stars do. But you can basically find that planet, yet again using things like computers and the internet.
planispheres, maybe for more advanced people.
Planispheres that show you where the planets are a little bit difficult to use, but yes, they can show you those sort of things.
Yeah, you have also a ruler.
And they're basically just a way of what a computer program will do for you these days. In fact, there are computer programs that you can get free off the internet, which you can say, where is Mars? It will show you a map of it relative to where you live, and you can then print it out so you can walk outside, stand there.
We have lovely programs on our web page with links where you can download, and all that softwares are actually easy to use, so everyone should be able to get a success in his nights.
Yeah. So there you are. You've got easily up to Mars already. You've got the computer programs. You can next start looking for the big gas giants. Next one you're going to find out is Jupiter. That is an amazing planet to watch. If you look at it with a pair of binoculars, you're going to see the 4 Galilean moons that go around it. And if you spend time night after night, or if you get a really long night and you can keep yourself warm and stay out long enough, you'll actually see that those 4 little bright specks that are on either side will actually move around and will actually change position.
Do you need binoculars to see that though, or is that with you?
You need binoculars to see the Galilean moons, as they're called. There are some people who say that they can actually see them with the naked eye. I personally, with my eyesight, can't.
Me either.
I think it's just some people are lucky with the quality of their eyesight that they're able to distinguish between the brightness of the planet and the actual brightness of that moon.
But can you tell that they are moons, or are they just little specks? Or what?
They just look like little specks, but it's when you see that the fact that they move around, and you've got these 4 things that move around, and yet again, if you look at the programs, you can get programs that will tell you which moon is which. So you can take out, as it were, a list of where those moons are going to be, and you can stand there and work out, looking through your binoculars, you can work out the names of each of the 4 moons and where it is, and it can tell you how long to wait until they move. And if you use a bird watching telescope on Jupiter, you can see the moons a lot better. You may actually see the cloud bands on Jupiter, depending on how high Jupiter is and what the atmosphere is like. But the thing that you can do, and it's a thing that it's good if you look on a computer program to work out when it's happening, is you can see what's called a shadow transit. And this is basically when one of the moons passes in front of Jupiter and casts its shadow onto the planet. Just like when you get a solar eclipse on the Earth. And what you see is, you don't see the moon actually itself because the moon's in front of Jupiter. But what you see is a black blob moving across the surface of Jupiter.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's amazing. With a bit bigger telescope, you see actually the moon.
Yeah.
So
You will do in a bigger telescope. If
with a 10-inch telescope, and when the weather situation is right, you can see actually the moon and then the spot. So I've seen that a couple of times. It was always amazing. Absolutely amazing. It's a lovely sign.
That's yet again, that's going from the bird watching telescopes up into, you're getting more keen and you want to spend more money, so you're going up to your bigger telescopes.
But do you really need much money for it up somewhere?
It depends on what you want to do with a telescope. The difficult bit with the telescopes is there's no one telescope which will suit everything. There'll always be something you'll suddenly decide you want to do, which it won't do. And if you're crazy with your money or want to do everything, you'll end up with more than one telescope, which some people can see as excessive. But you know that you need more than one telescope to be able to do the different things. But a Dobsonian telescope, you can see Jupiter quite easily. You'll see Saturn with its rings very easily. You'll see certainly the split in some of the rings between the inner and the outer rings. You'll probably see 1 or 2 of the moons of Saturn quite easily. On Mars you'll actually see some of the dark areas. On Venus you will see the clouds. You'll see the shape of Venus, the fact that it's in front and it acts like the moon because it's an inner planet, and it's never always a sphere. It's sometimes seen as a crescent. Mercury, if you get lucky, you will just see it as a blob. You won't see much detail on Mercury at all. But that's with a Dobsonian telescope, and it again depends on size. It's going back to what I said earlier about what you expect to see through a telescope. Certainly in the 80s there used to be a fever called aperture envy, where basically what you wanted to do was get the largest aperture telescope with the shortest focal length going that you could get hold of. So it was as short as possible, so easy to move around, but it was very, very wide and collected a lot of light, and was known as a light bucket. Pros and cons optically as to whether they were great telescopes, but people went down that route for a bit. The problem with light buckets is they did get to a very nice size, and I actually had the opportunity once to use a 1 metre aperture Dobsonian, which is a very nice telescope, but at 3 o'clock in the morning on your own, standing on top of a rickety ladder to see one of the most amazing views of Jupiter I've ever seen, you begin to wonder, have you gone a little too far?
Yeah. Especially when you want to transport and bring it up to a mountain.
Precisely. That telescope wasn't going to go anywhere, and on a bad day you weren't going to be able to protect it from the elements, you just had to cover it up. But it was a nice telescope while you could get hold of it. So if you go for a solar telescope, some people don't want to bother with this nighttime stuff, let's be honest about it. Some people actually want to look at the daytime stuff. And with a solar telescope, if you get the correct filters, and they are a little bit expensive, never ever look at the sun without a special solar filter on. Never make your own solar filter, because
doesn't matter with what type of telescope.
Doesn't matter with what type of telescope at all. If you look at the sun, you might as well poke your eyes out. It's as simple as that, because they're just going to burn holes in your eyes. But you can actually, from some companies, buy proper solar telescopes, and you can actually look at prominences coming off, and you can watch the sunspots, do that sort of thing. For other stuff, if you want to look at the planets, some people say that, well, don't use a Dobsonian, they say use a conventional type telescope where you've got a big lens at the front and the eyepiece at the back. It gives you better contrast and you get better images. Yes, by all means, if that's what you want to do, but you'll find that they're more expensive than a lower cost Dobsonian, which is basically just 2 mirrors shoved in a cardboard tube. The Newtonian telescope, which is the mirror telescope which the Dobsonian was sort of evolved from, is basically that tube assembly, that mirror at one end and a reflecting mirror to push the image out to the side of the tube. Basically, if you take one of those and you stick it on a mount, you can then actually have it so it actually tracks, which is great if you want to actually watch something for a long time, or you want to track a comet. But it's also good if you then want to start doing photography. But that's very long-term photography. You do not need to do that. You can go right back to the beginning with photography and just take a camera, something that's very simple, provided it contains a 15-second exposure at ISO 400. Preferably if it's one that can do B, which means it'll open it for 60 seconds or longer, but 15 seconds, ISO 400, on a tripod, set it to infinity if you can set the focus, press the self timer button so that you're not actually pressing it to start, and then just step back. You can take pictures of the stars, you can take pictures of aurora. Then if you wish to spend more money again, you can go up to bigger cameras, and then you can go further and stick them onto a mount. How much money do you want to spend? But you can enjoy your hobby of astronomy just by stepping out the door and letting your eyes adapt.
We have got amazing pictures from Chris, what you also find on our webpage. You have done them just with a tripod and a standard camera.
Some of those are done with a standard camera and a tripod. Some of them have been tracked. I've started to get into photography which is more tracked now. But on a night in which maybe it's windy or I haven't got much time, I'll just put a camera on a tripod, run outside, take 5 or 6 photographs, go back in, and then a few nights later I'll play around with them on the computer to compile them together and turn them into a reasonable photograph if I get lucky, or if I don't, bin it, start again.
The pictures are really amazing. You will find them in the picture gallery. We have got some galaxy pictures from Chris. We have got nebulas he have given us. Yeah. Then as well constellations, that was the word that I searched. Yeah, they are really amazing. You say just camera, what for camera? 4,000, 6,000 pound camera? Or?
No. There's some pictures I have taken which are done on a £300 sort of point and shoot camera which sits in my pocket.
You're a liar.
I'm not a liar. I've taken photographs, astrophotographs on film cameras, which basically it doesn't matter what they cost. You can take any, if you want to work with film and you like film rather than doing digital, you can take pictures on a camera which costs you pennies from a second-hand shop. Well, then you get yourself a reasonable lens on the front of it, no problems at all.
That's actually good news for beginners.
Certainly for beginners, yeah. But mostly they'll find that most of the cameras they've already got that they use taking photographs of their friends, a lot of them can be adapted to take astronomical photographs to some degree.
You're a scientist.
Yes, I'm what's known as a healthcare scientist. Yeah, I suppose my subsection of healthcare science is what's called clinical physiology, and subsection on that is cardiac clinical physiology. So my job is basically to take measurements, usually of the heart in action, and the vast majority of that these days is actually doing ultrasound of the heart to see its size, to see its function, to see which bits are working, which bits aren't working. When the doctors have thought there's a problem, then they need to know what the problem is, if there is one, and to what degree it is, to work out what it is they need to do next to make the person a little better and a little bit happier.
So with other words, you're a telescope operator.
It's a data collector. If I really look at myself, I have a habit of collecting data. I don't keep
which astronomers as well do.
Yeah, which is basically what astrophotography is about. It's data collecting. On the other hand, I do not keep a diary and can't keep a diary for love nor money. So that sort of data collecting I can't do. But if I have to go out and spend the night under the stars to get a photograph of one thing, I will do that, rather than actually taking photographs of everything, which once you've actually sort of taken the widescreen photographs, you suddenly find that you want to just concentrate on one. And we have to be honest, the downside of Shetland is it may have relatively light pollution-free skies, unless of course you live near the towns, or Sandwich, or Coningsborough, or Sullombo, or the like. But you don't get that many clear nights, and you don't get that many clear nights when the moon is out the way, which is what I prefer, because I don't really have that much interest in taking lunar photographs.
You had a talk last year, I think, was it already 2 years ago, how to work with simple cameras in the night. And maybe we will do a second session with you. So if anyone is interested, you could make another talk for us and people can see practically how that works.
Yes. Yeah. Astrophotography for beginners, or the easy way to do it. It doesn't require lots and lots of equipment, depending on what level you want to work at and how much you want to spend or can afford to spend.
Is it as well possible after you talk, does people then come later on and can talk directly to you? Or can you give them helps and tips when they bring their camera?
Oh, that's certainly happened a couple of years back when we gave the talk. Told people to bring their cameras along if they wished to, and we were able to point out what they could and couldn't do. There was a couple of young people there that their cameras weren't that great for doing astronomy pictures, but they could actually do other pictures of night time and get to the moon and the planets in as a widescreen, as a background, and they were able to learn how to use their cameras to do that. If they got more interest, they knew then what they needed to look for in their next camera to allow them to do a bit more.
What tips could you give a poor astronomer to get hints to the family what they can give him as Christmas present?
Oh, well, giving hints and tips, that's always a difficult one. How heavily do you drop them? It depends on basically, where your, as it were, your main hobby lies with astronomy. Let's be honest about it. The main thing when you go outside is being warm and being able to access all the bits that you want to take out with you. So if you haven't got a sun lounger, I'd suggest that you get a sun lounger. That's the first thing you need. You need then things to keep you warm. You need a hat, a balaclava,
Coffee flask.
with mug. I use salopettes, skiing salopettes. They keep me very warm. They've got lots of little pockets in, or something on the outside that's got lots of little pockets in, so that you can easily get at things.
Maybe star maps, star charts.
Star maps and star charts I use less of. I have a habit of memorising the bits I want, because I concentrate on areas and then go outside and look at them. But if you've got star charts and planispheres, you need to then consider the most important bit is what your eyesight is doing. When you go out first thing into the dark from inside your house, you won't see much. You might trip over the steppy, in fact. But you stand there in the darkest part of your garden or the backyard and you wait till your eyes start to adapt. And you'll suddenly start seeing things which you know are there, but all suddenly start to come to you as your eyes adapt to the dark. Now the last thing you need to do is have somebody come along and shine a light in there, or pick up a white torch and shine it at something, because you're going to lose all that. So if you can get a red torch, a very faint red torch, you'd be amazed how much you can see things. You can read maps that you've made, you could read your planisphere and be able to see things. In fact, with the red torches these days, even though they're very faint, you can actually see enough to stop tripping over things as you make your way to your sun lounger.
Right. Then I would say thank you very much for your talk, Chris.
Pleasure.
I hope we can do an interview with you later on again.
Certainly.
It's the right time of year to get out and start doing things.
Yeah.
It's getting the darker nights now, so
Yep. Please can we have a clear night?
it's well worthwhile here.
Yeah, we are through. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. More information from Chris Brown can be found on his website, paddles.shetland.co.uk. In addition to our online radio, our very own Chris McGinley has begun posting monthly podcasts on our webpage, shetlandastrosoc.org.uk. Chris gives useful monthly updates on general news from the world of astronomy and lists objects that can be observed in the night sky in Shetland. More from Chris can be found on his website at unpossible.info. We hope to interview Chris for a future radio programme.
Shetland Astronomical Society's
Online Radio.
Next in our programme, Brian Sheen from the Roseland Observatory, Cornwall, visited Shetland this summer and gave us a presentation to celebrate Neptune's first birthday, the planet's first solar orbit since its discovery in 1846. Brian has spent some time researching the life of Cornish astronomer and mathematician John Couch Adams, and has pieced together the story of how Adams was able to painstakingly plot the position of the elusive eighth planet. The story is set against the background of an international race to find the planet. As Shetland represented Neptune in the scale model of the Scottish solar system, the story felt especially relevant. Brian was kind enough to give a short interview to our roving reporter Paul Bendix, in which he explains how he became interested in astronomy and answers some poignant questions about the place of astronomy in the world today. So, it's over to Paul.
The SAS Interview.
Hello, this is a Shetland Astronomical Society interview with Brian Sheen, Director of the Roseland Observatory, Fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, and author of recent articles for, amongst others, The Sky at Night. His web address is www.roselandobservatory.com. Brian, how did you become interested in astronomy?
Well, it's got rather a sort of fascinating start. I was sitting on the piano stool at home as a very, very young child when I sort of fell off and hit my head against the table. And I saw all these bright lights and I said, "What are those, Father?" And he said, "They are stars, my boy, they are stars." So it sort of stuck in the mind, that did. And eventually we moved out of London and came down to a very dark area of Cornwall, and we had a pair of very cheap binoculars, and I pointed them at the stars and the moon, became fascinated. I had a good teacher at the school who I pestered endlessly about matters astronomical and what we knew at that time, and so it sort of developed on, really. And eventually the eclipse in 1999 gave us a big kick in the right direction, and we've never really looked back.
So, how did you end up in your current appointment as director of the Roseland Observatory?
Well, this again is another one of those curious things. The Roseland Observatory was set up by a friend of mine purely for the eclipse, and when that finished he moved the equipment back to Plymouth, which is where he lived, and left me with a few bits and pieces, and I was looking for somewhere to set it correctly, and one of my rugby playing friends, who's 6'8", unfortunately is a bit tall for this stargazing lark, he's almost in the heavens himself, and he came and suggested that I should set the observatory up on his campsite because he wanted to diversify the farm into camping with a special theme, i.e. astronomy.
All right. Okay. So the campsite is open and people can go there, and then they can see your observatory.
Yep, it is an open campsite for all sorts of people, but when they look into their website, or indeed mine, they see sort of pretty much at the head of it then the opportunity to go stargazing at Court Farm in St Stephen's, Cornwall.
Okay, right. Well, are you undertaking any research at present?
We are indeed. We obviously don't have access to the gigantic telescopes that the rest of the world have, but nevertheless, because I've been interested in older things, I've studied the history of the discovery of Neptune. That also is a Cornish thing, and I also know it's important for Shetland, because Shetland is known as Neptune in the Scottish planetary system.
Indeed we are, yes.
Yeah. So that was good linkage, and we do that, and we've made some good headway with that. And the other old thing I get involved with is the stone circle research, trying to work out whether the stone circles have alignments to special sunrises and sunsets, which they do, and there's a lot more to be gained from that, and we are steadily making headway in that direction as well.
So is there anything we can do to help?
Yes, I think there is. We obviously live at the sort of very southern end of the United Kingdom. You live very much at the northern end of the United Kingdom. It gives us a good baseline, and as the technology on our side, and presumably yours too perhaps, though we know how good that is, that we should be able to work together and do joint observations sometimes, and certainly exchange information between the two setups to our mutual benefit.
How interesting. We must pursue this further.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anyway, to move on to other topics then perhaps. A side issue of the worldwide economic recession has been that President Obama has slashed the NASA budget. Many of the previous administration's ambitious projects have been axed. Are we about to enter a sort of fallow period or a downturn in space exploration and astronomy?
I don't think we are, not really. I think probably what's going to happen is that the existing facilities that we have, and the ones that are actually locked in to be on stream and can't be halted in that way, will actually give us a nice broad base which will continue to use those facilities much more intensively perhaps than we would otherwise have done if the effort had been diluted into some of these more ambitious plans. And that's what I'm hoping for, that no, we're far from entering into a fallow period. Indeed, we could well be entering into a new age of enlightenment, because we are gathering in information which is absolutely new, and we will benefit from that in the years to come.
So, if I can take you back to a comment from a US congressman in 1972, he said, "How can I justify spending money finding out if there are microbes on Mars when I know there are rats and cockroaches in the apartments of Harlem?" we face the same sort of dilemma today, don't we? What would you say today in response to that Congressman's question?
To be honest, if we'd stopped spending any money at all on space research in '72, there would still be cockroaches and rats in Harlem. And indeed, so far as the United Kingdom's concerned, it's said that nobody lives with a rat any further away than about 10 metres. And we don't claim to be sort of overrun with rats, we just don't notice them. But spending money on space research may sound trivial compared with some of the great issues of our planet, but on the other hand, I believe it gives an outlet for the sort of higher mental side, if you like, and allows people to think wider, and the outcomes from that research and development can be then recycled into perhaps helping our other more obvious needs. I personally spent 6 months in the Nigerian Civil War on the front line helping with relief work in one of the extreme famine situations of the day, and I can fully understand both sides, and I would very much like to go back again, but probably time is against me. But nevertheless, we must do the modern stuff, the development research stuff, as well as looking after the other members of our planet.
Interesting. A number of countries appear to be considering expeditions to the moon. Have we been there already? Is this a worthwhile thing to do?
I think so, very much. We did send a few people round about 30 odd years ago, if you recall.
So yes, I think so.
Just a handful of people went. They spent a relatively short time. We've backed that up with probes and other observatories looking at the moon, but we now realise there's an immense amount more to do, and I think the human peoples have always been keen on stepping out beyond their own environs, and going to the moon is the obvious first step, and I think that will happen. A lot will be gained from that, and to the benefit really of sort of future research, and also we trust for the future of peace on Earth, because working together is a strong element in that.
Yes, cooperation. Yes.
Cooperation is the name of the game.
Well, that sort of, in a way, leads quite interestingly into the next question, which is there anything you'd like to say about hydrogen fusion, cooperation perhaps, and future energy requirements?
Absolutely. So I know I'm speaking in perhaps the oil capital of the UK. Yeah.
Ah, indeed.
We are. But nevertheless, taken again in the longer view, then it's obviously the burning of fossil fuels, which are not endless, is actually adding to the atmospheric pollution, the increasing carbon dioxide levels and so on, and all the climate change problems that we hear of. And the immediate people will think, oh, let's set up a few wind turbines. But in the, again, sort of 20, 30, maybe more years down track, then hydrogen or helium will be the source of energy for the future, and hopefully that will be clean and safe and very well worthwhile, because we are overpopulating our planet too, and we need to get energy which is perfectly recyclable and sustainable. There's a huge effort going on in Europe, I know, towards tokamaks and the other techniques of fusion, and they reckon that they'll be there shortly.
Really? Okay. Oh no, I wasn't really sure if it was still a bit pie in the sky.
Oh no, we'll get there directly, as the Cornish would say.
Okay. On a perhaps slightly different topic, we've seen a couple of commercial ventures offering to sell land on the moon. Now, how does this stack up with international agreements on ownership of the moon? Are these sort of commercial ventures realistic or viable or enforceable in the legal sense?
I'm afraid these topics of selling the acres of the moon to people and stars and things leaves me almost speechless, and I shan't be able to talk for more than 20 minutes on the subject. So it really does annoy me that people should be so gullible as to accept these gifts and purchases and so on, totally beyond legality. And it's very disappointing. The stars one is the one that's most disappointing. They sell somebody a star which even if you could put a telescope on it, it's magnitude 9 or 10 or so, and it's in amongst thousands of other little stars, and you can't be sure which one is your wife's or your girlfriend's or your boyfriend's or your dad's particular star, and they've sold it to you for money. And how on earth they get away with it and how they can sleep at night, I have no idea. But I'm sure that if somebody would only sort of sell, if you like, timeshare to a star that you could see, I think there would be some slight more relevance to it, because we're not all built the same way, and some people like to point at a star and think of perhaps their parents in that way. Not for me, but for others maybe. But to tell them that they can purchase a star which is impossible to see or locate is, I can't put words to it really. Rendered speechless, as I say.
I see. This is obviously something that goes fairly close to your heart.
Absolutely. There's a Cornishman trying to flog acres of the moon, but he hasn't come to me yet.
I suspect that may be an I'm wise route for him to go.
I would say so, yes.
Okay, well, telescopes, probes, manned missions.
Yep.
Which do you think provides the most bang for your buck?
Bang for your buck. Well, I think you must work all three systems together in a sort of collaboration, one system with the other. I suppose you could look at it and say, well, the big telescopes on Earth can see various areas of the universe. The ones that live in the remoter areas of space will be able to zoom in perhaps a little closer, give us a different view in a different part of the spectrum. And of course, if we could actually send people to, so we say, in longer term Mars, then yet more will be gained. To try and isolate one from the other, I think, is fruitless and pointless, but they have to work together in harmony.
So perhaps telescopes sweeping a broad area,
Yeah.
and then probes homing in on areas of particular interest.
Yep.
And then when you have a particularly fine point,
Yes.
where you need something which is something or someone who is particularly flexible, that's when you target the manned mission.
That's right. I think so.
Except manned missions are so very, very expensive.
They are indeed. I don't know how realistic they will actually be to be in any quantity. History tells us they won't be very, very common at all, but there's nevertheless a lot of interest there, and the space station's a sort of good midway step after all. We're sat up there all the time now, looking out and studying, and now it's been built and we've closed the shuttle program down. We're left then to develop the space station as it ought to be, as a base for science out there.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your views. It's been a most interesting session, and I'm most grateful to you. This is Paul Bendix from the Shetland Astronomical Society saying thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. If you found the interviews interesting, maybe you could consider joining an astronomy club near you. Please feel free to browse our website shetlandastrosoc.org.uk for astrophotos, web links and coming events. Mikey is currently working on the Skylab paper model, which should be available to download in the new year. And if you're looking for a last-minute Christmas present, sets of 3 DVDs are still available from the SAS shop. These are live recordings of the Cosmic Threats to Earth lectures in Edinburgh and include talks by the 2 Astronomers Royal, Lord Rees and Professor John Brown, and much more. More details on our website. To order, please email reg.hussey, as HUSSEY, at btinternet.com. That's all from the team for now. We hope you enjoyed the programme. Please send any comments or suggestions for the programme to astro-mike@hotmail.co.uk. Our next radio programme is planned for June 2012. So, here's wishing you all a very happy Christmas and all the best for the new year. This radio programme was recorded and edited by Mikey from the SAS. Atmospheric and title music was composed and performed by Lyle Campbell. Please visit myspace.com/CE3992 for more.